or the typical people who maybe work in a social organization, NGO. What's different from a social entrepreneur? And you know, there's many different qualities that are required to cause social change. So I just want to kind of point out a few that I think are really in our control. The first one is, and I've interviewed probably, you know, 1,000 social entrepreneurs or people who I would consider social innovators. And what I'm always struck by is their willingness to take action when they have some information, but not all the information they probably need. And that's kind of interesting because, you know, you may have, if you've ever been in a foundation or in an academic environment, there are places where people really think that they need to have every piece of information under the sun before they begin. And this really pushes out the action curve. And the idea that you need a lot of information before you begin presumes that most of your information you can get in advance. Whereas what you find with innovators, social entrepreneurial people, is they presume that most of the information they're going to get is going to happen while they're doing the thing itself. So the idea is to begin with a kind of modest amount of information, a kind of gut feel, or enough to get started, a good enough plan, not a really extensive 3-year plan that is perfect, because as soon as the ink dries on that plan and you implement this in the world, you will change that plan. You will change it the first day you implement it, absolutely. And all of your assumptions, there probably won't be one assumption that is correct. If there is one assumption that's correct, that's good. Yeah. So you find these people who are out there in this kind of action research mode, and they're constantly iterating. And if you actually look at what success looks like, if you boil down success, how many people have taken calculus, struggled through calculus? Okay, so all of the little sort of really tiny rectangles are all failures. But the curve is success, but if you look at any point in time and try to isolate what happened in that point in time, it was a failure. It was something that didn't work as well as it could have worked. And this is the most interesting, like I remember I was interviewing this woman years ago called Jiru Bilamoria, who started this organization called Childline in India. And, you know, and the ability to sort of take success and turn that in a kind of alchemy into gold for yourself is a wonderful quality. So I asked her this question. She was trying to get a network of organizations across Bombay to join together to create what would have been, or what has become, the first child protection hotline in India. And so she went to 100 organizations, and she asked them to join what she called Childline. And 86 turned her down. So she had what I would look at as a 14% success rate, not a very good success rate. And I asked her about that, and I remember saying, like, how did you feel? Were you very discouraged? Did you want to quit? And she said, no, I was very excited. I was so excited. And I was like, why were you so excited if 86 turned you down? And she said, because I realized that we were trying to do something new, and in order to do something new, you need high commitment. So if 86 turned us down, it must mean that the 14 who said yes must be very motivated, right? Right? Because so many people thought it was a bad idea. If they think it's a good idea, they must really get it. So and it was interesting to me. It was a kind of a glimpse into how a crazy person thinks. But so necessary, because she began with those 14, and she was right. She needed to have very high level. She needed to have a bunch of other crazy, very motivated people, and the best way to do that is to, is to wait for the, is to give a speech to 300 people, and then see the 2 people that stay until 10 o'clock asking questions. You want to have those people who are very highly motivated. So that was a very important lesson for me. So this, if you think about it, if you want a phrase to capture that, it's failing forward. Failing forward, very easy to remember, which is this iterative process of trying things out, getting information, and then reapplying that information for the next iteration. The other quality, I think, I want to focus on 3. So the other characteristics that I thought were very interesting were basically, most innovators are at essence mass recruiters. They're recruiters of other people. And the idea is that most entrepreneurs are really good at 1 or 2 things, and usually terrible at many other things, and including management. There's very few that are really good managers. Very often they're fantastic at lead generation, really good, and terrible at follow-through. You see that a lot. You see a lot of people who are, they're great communicators. I think communication is probably the single skill that if you work on in your life, and it's basically one-to-one communication, that you will correlate more highly with any other skill, with success in any other skill. Which is to say, if you want to do something in your life, the way to do those things, is to say, what are 10 relationships that will help me to build X, whatever X is. It could be an organization to solve a problem. It could be a group, a political group. It could be a committee inside a company to help change the way that that company is working. If you want, whatever you want to do in your thing, you need to figure out what are 10 relationships that will help me get this going. And then start off with 2 relationships. So how do you start new relationships? You basically, you ask people out to lunch. You call them up. And usually these are people who intimidate you, because if these are people who are going to help you build something, they very often are mentors. They might be people who are years older than you. They might be people who have a lot of money, or who have the ability to command attention and so forth. The head of the university, the head of a company, and so forth. How do you ask somebody like that to lunch? There's a famous story of Steve Jobs calling up Mr. Hewlett when he was 12 years old, and basically just like insisting on speaking to him. I think it was Mr. Packard, so that he could get an internship in Hewlett Packard for the summer when he was 12. And it's a sort of a funny story, right? I mean, he kind of insisted. He wouldn't let any of the secretaries sort of take a message, and eventually he got to speak to Mr. Packard, and he was able to sort of get that experience. I mean, so I remember speaking to this woman. Her name was Eugenie Lang. And she was creating a Stanley Kaplan-like course for low-income kids. So basically, SAT help for kids who couldn't normally do the Stanley Kaplan or the Princeton Review courses, because she thought they should also have that advantage too. And she thought it would really be good to have Stanley Kaplan on her board of directors. Yeah, sure, it's great. It would be great to have him. At the time, this was like 10 or 15 years ago. And she said she sent him, like 10 messages. Phone calls, faxes. I don't think she used email, but she didn't get one response from him. So eventually she wrote him a letter that said, because she had this, all her life she'd had this idea, this image of like meeting him in an elevator by accident. And she'd only had, from the 8th floor to the ground to explain why he should be on her board of directors. And she had sort of rehearsed this speech like 100 times in her mind. And so she thought, I have to at least give him my speech. So she sent him the speech as like a one-act play, that they meet in the elevator, and then she has this thing, and she gives his reactions, and who's this crazy person who's talking to me like? And she gets a phone call back from Stanley Kaplan, and eventually he's like, who are you? What do you want from me? But she gets her meeting, and she rehearsed herself, and she got him on the board. So she was able to turn that. And you think that that's bold. But that was a key relationship. She saw that relationship as on critical path. Now, once you've done that with one person in your life, you can do that 100 times. Once you've sort of crossed that insecurity threshold, the discomfort of feeling that you're really imposing on another person and so forth, because if your idea is really great, then you're giving this person a gift ultimately, right? Because you're giving this person a chance to help build something that's really great, which is what we're all on this earth to do anyways. But we have to get over these things. And there's been a couple of key relationships in my life that I have started this way, where I overcame my nerves, and I kind of reached out to somebody and said, I'd really love to talk with you. And in some cases, you have to contact people 5 or 6 times before and you start thinking in your mind, this person's thinking that I'm stalking them. Right? And we all have this thing like, once is enough if they don't respond. And yet these have almost, without fail, been transformative relationships. So that's a real important characteristic. Failing forward is a really important one, and initiating new relationships based on something that's real. Like, you got to pick people who you think, this person, obviously gets this idea. Stanley Kaplan gets the power of Stanley Kaplan. He just wasn't doing it. He was only doing it for the rich kids, not for the poor kids. So she was able to make that synapse happen. And the third thing is, once again, as I mentioned, most social entrepreneurs are very good at one thing, and typically over time, they end up narrowing their jobs so that they're doing that one thing, and they are bringing in other people to do the other thing. So help understanding what it is that you do best, and in my case, I think it's communication. It's certainly not management. Knowing what you do best and figuring out how to actually pull a team together of people who really are more than the sum of their parts is great. So you're recruiting people and really and not trying to sort of do things yourself that you shouldn't be doing. And I think that when I see failure happen, most of the time it's because the person at the helm is taking too much responsibility for something that they're lousy at. And in some cases it leads to whole things falling apart, whole organizations falling apart, because it really, really hurts motivation and so forth. There's, in this particular moment in time, looking forward, I think there's a couple of really key global challenges that are, that really sort of stand out in terms of helping the world overcome this, this transition from poor performance vis-a-vis social challenges to a much higher level performance vis-a-vis social challenges. So what are the things that usually go wrong when we try to solve social problems? What usually doesn't happen that should have happened? So the first thing is, the field of social change up until recently didn't recognize the role of and honor entrepreneurs. Okay? It was